Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hello Firstname podcast, Season 2. My name is Rasmus Hårlin, author of the book Hello Firstname, and the theme of this season is how to solve the content crisis for personalization. Let's dive in. Hello everybody and welcome to this brand new episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. In this podcast, we're exploring how personalization at scale can maybe finally come true using generative AI. And we're talking a lot about the CX layers, the content layers, and the data layers, and how they merge into personalization. And this week, we have a very special guest. Daniel, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Rasmus. Thank you for having me. And
maybe
always nice.
to start with, maybe tell us just a bit about who you are, your career journey, and in your current role, what are you doing as a CRO specialist at VodafoneZiggo?
Yeah, sure. So to start with the personal part first, I'm Daniel Granja Baltazar, Portuguese roots, born and raised in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I started with a master in marketing management. I applied at Debt, which are now really big.
Yeah.
But I also knew I'm not the top list candidate from all the candidates they have, so I need to do something special here. So instead of writing a motivational letter, I put that motivational letter into a Spotify playlist. So all the songs were actually me introducing myself, my skills, telling that I grew up in Rotterdam, lived in Paris and São Paulo, Brazil.
Yeah.
And then I tagged the recruiters in that. I sent them it via email. I tagged them on LinkedIn. I put a LinkedIn banner saying hi Debt recruiters, you've got mail, visit this playlist on Spotify. And the playlist was literally called Hi Debt, you've got mail. Within 20 minutes, I got the call back from the recruiter who said, in the 5 years I work here, I've never seen this. I'm actually showing this in our weekly recruitment meeting to the other recruiters. And then after doing almost 6 years agency side, I was like, okay, let's go to the other side.
Yes.
At the agency side, they say the dark side. But for me, it was interesting to see that other dynamic, right? Instead of running sprints, like doing a marathon, so to say. And VodafoneZiggo was a no-brainer because in terms of CRO, they won a lot of awards, not only in the Netherlands, but also even abroad. And they're really playing the A-level game, so to say. So
maybe you need to explain a bit what VodafoneZiggo is. I think most people will be. I can relate to the brand Vodafone, but VodafoneZiggo and in the Netherlands, and I mean, what is it? What's about? What sets it apart in the market? And
this is a question I get a lot from people outside the Netherlands. People in the Netherlands sometimes have more of a familiarity with Vodafone if they're mobile customers, or like Ziggo if they have fixed internet or TV. But basically, long story short, Vodafone Group entered the Netherlands all the way back in the 90s as Libertel. It then rebranded to Vodafone Netherlands. And they were actually only offering mobile subscriptions and mobile phones. And then you had UPC, which later became Ziggo, and they were a cable provider. So they were offering fixed internet and TV, interactive TV, all that kind of stuff. And then basically, as the market was consolidating in the Netherlands, you saw competitors like KPN buy smaller competitors and becoming bigger and offering more services. Vodafone and Ziggo decided to form a joint venture at the start of 2017, rebranding to VodafoneZiggo, meaning that they can offer mobile, fixed, cybersecurity.
Makes sense.
The whole shebang. And
both B2C and B2B clients.
Exactly. They offer both B2C and B2B in the widest sense, from a freelancer that's self-employed all the way to big corporates and government institutions.
How does CRO and personalization fit into a company strategy like that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, if I look at my perspective, I'm at Vodafone Business, and that's specific at the SME segment. So that's companies that have 5 to 250 employees,
Yeah.
That's a massive
Huge difference
segment.
between the lower part and the larger part of that segment.
Huge difference. And also, if you look at Dutch statistics, I don't know it out of the top of my head, but I think something like maybe 35% or 40% of all companies are in the SME segment. And indeed, a company with 5 employees that has one location has completely different needs compared to a company that has 200 people across multiple offices in the Netherlands, even though we still label them SME. Very different needs. And also, depending on the industry that you're in and the situation that you're in, financially, economically, a company that is stable and doesn't foresee big growth in the future, they basically want to maintain things as is. It's also a very different IT situation compared to companies that are scaling rapidly. They have very different IT needs in that part. So that's basically the challenge that we have. Like, how do you speak to all those different sub-segments within that one big segment? How do you make the content relevant? How do you make it easy to understand?
So even though you have the same message, maybe you need to tell it differently depending on who you are reaching.
So what we are now actually doing is, for example, with BlueConic, use personalization, where depending on what you've seen, which products, which segments on our website, we will personalize the content based on that. Also, if we can recognize you as a customer versus somebody that's not a customer of ours.
Like the first B2B personalization thing to consider, existing client or not.
Exactly, existing client or not, and then also which kind of products and services have you visited. So we're currently in the process of actually implementing that this quarter. So let's say, for example, last time you visited our website, you looked at cybersecurity products. It doesn't make sense that if you return back to our website next time that you see mobile phones and all these things. You would basically want to pick off where you left last time.
Exactly.
So based on that browsing behavior, we'll know like, okay, Rasmus is not a customer of ours. Last time he looked at cybersecurity products. So here we show a product or service that's relevant to your needs.
Exactly.
But then there's also another angle, like some people are more tech savvy than others. And we are also investigating like, hey, how can we create different content based on those needs to make sure that an IT manager, for example, who is way more tech savvy, sees different kind of things than the founder of a small company that only thinks like, hey, does this particular product or service solve this particular problem that I have?
So is it sounds like it's a lot of it is online on the website, but is it also in your outbound channels and how you are, and probably also your service channels as well? So when someone is calling in and looking for advice, or they are reporting a ticket, or they're calling the service center, or you are sending them, I don't know, emails and stuff like that. Do you have like an omni-channel approach to it?
We have a lot of channels. So indeed, like we have the website, people can use the chat, people can directly call, email. We have an email newsletter, but also email communications. We even use direct mail as well. So there's a lot of channels. We have physical stores, over 100 of them across the Netherlands. So there's that part. And then also within the business space, we have business partners. So resellers, other companies that actually sell our products and services, but also help implementing them. So we're multi-channel at the moment. We're not fully omni-channel. Like that's what we strive to be, but we're taking steps to move into that direction.
That makes sense. All right. Thank you for that intro. So let's zoom in maybe a bit on your role. So you're working with CRO, and I agree that it's a critical aspect of improving customer experiences in general across all these channels also that we spoke of. But like on a day-to-day basis, what do you do? From your perspective, what does your role entail, and how does that fit into sort of the broader marketing strategy that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if I, for example, explain CRO to people who've already heard about conversion rate optimization, they usually think, oh, it's regarding, looking at data and doing A/B tests and analyzing those A/B tests.
Yeah.
And usually they think pretty much like that.
Web experimentation, sort of that approach.
Exactly. But if I look at a lot of the data in our SME domain, we do not even have enough traffic for the tests. So there's actually only a small part of the website where we can do that.
Yeah, what do you then do?
What do you do then? Well, it's not that we're just going to sit around and wait, to reach those numbers of visitors.
So I guess getting to a point where you have a statistical significance, okay, so we set an experiment. Let's meet up in 2 months and see if we have enough to make a decision.
No, you can already know, like looking at the data, like, okay, this page won't have enough traffic, so we cannot run a A/B test there. But there's other ways, right, to validate whether or not people, for example, understand what's on that page, whether they have certain concerns or questions that are not being addressed.
Yeah.
So what I'm really using a lot as well is the qualitative research part. So think, for example, about setting up website surveys with Mopinion to understand, like, hey, is this information clear, or are they missing certain things? And if so, what's that? So that we can improve the product pages, for example. That can be in terms of content, but maybe even in terms of language, we're using too difficult words. Another part, and that's something that wasn't really being done in-house when I joined almost 2.5 years ago. And luckily, we're starting to do that more and more in-house. And I'm a really strong advocate to fully do that in-house, is customer interviews and user interviews. Pre-validate stuff even before you build it. I think that the term MVP, minimum viable product, gets abused a lot within big companies. They say, oh yeah, we create an MVP. Basically, we set something live, we never look at it again, and we move on with the next task on the to-do list. But the way it should be is that you want to know, like, okay, we have certain assumptions, a certain way of thinking. We're not fully sure if that's actually correct. So instead of already putting something live, let's create an interactive prototype in Figma, and let's interview, let's say, maybe 10 customers. We video call them via Microsoft Teams. We give them access to this Figma prototype. We ask them questions. We observe their behavior. And for these entrepreneurs, after 5 minutes, they don't feel like it's an experiment, because they click on something and they're being directed to...
it's a working prototype.
Exactly. So that's giving us a lot of insights that usually even go beyond what we intended to research. And that is then also really important to communicate to all the teams across the company, so it doesn't stay on one island. Making sure there's organizational learning. So, for example, people look at...
I don't think I actually spoke so much about the qualitative research part on this podcast before, but it is extremely important. It's something that I'm trained in that personally from when I used to go to university. We did a lot of like usability tests and like open-ended interviews, semi-structured interviews, and all those kinds of things. It was, and I think, we're going to talk about content shortly, and I guess that's where you get a lot of this, what I call lifecycle content, stuff that you want to tell customers because they didn't know, or there was info that they needed or missed or whatever. So if you're struggling to find out what are our messages, what are the messages that we should put into personalization, this qualitative research can really give you a long list of stuff that you should be telling your customers, but you maybe didn't know about.
Correct. And I think actually, to give a few concrete examples, like we did interviews at the beginning of the year. No, sorry, not this year, but beginning of last year. And for example,
I like to think it's still the beginning of this year.
But we're doing interviews also later this quarter, actually starting next week, which I'm really excited for. But the interviews we did at the beginning of last year, we found out that in the designs we were communicating in product names like Business Mobile and OneNet and all the product names that we've invented for our products and services. And entrepreneurs were having a hard time to know whether they're taking the right exit, so they click through and they're like, well, I'm still not sure if I've arrived at the right page. So that insight taught us like, hey, we're not Apple. We're not selling iPhones and the whole world knows what an iPhone is.
Exactly.
We're a telecommunication company, and people are more looking for the product category first.
Yes.
So let's say mobile subscriptions for SME, fixed connectivity for SME, cybersecurity for SME, so
it's
that
called,
people
not
know.
call it the product name. I've seen the same with so I have had a participant or guest from Pandora, and they were very internally they were very preoccupied with what was the name of this collection that they were launching. Like, okay, so we have the spring collection, they have a code name for that, and they were and people were just looking for gold rings and not any particular collection name or whatever. So they completely had to flip that upside down. Okay, this is an internal thing. Let's not sort of force people to adopt our way of looking at things.
And I think interviews are a good way of then really see, right, what potential customers experience in that regard, and also to hold a mirror to ourselves, because we're so deep in the stuff that we're doing from a day to day that sometimes we forget, like, our customers, they're not that deep on it.
Exactly.
Also, they're not looking at our website every single day. If they're doing that, they usually have issues, like either technical issues or maybe personal.
Let's not confuse them.
Like, we're the only ones that are that obsessive with our brand and our products. But sometimes people tend to forget that. So there was like a good sanity check to say, hey, let's communicate in product category first and product name second. So people know I've come to the right page. Okay, this is what the product is called at VodafoneZiggo.
And that sounds to me like, so that's optimizing the general experience. I mean, obviously you already have a segment, which is like the SME customers. But still, I mean, what's the best average way of communicating to them when you have them on the web page? And that's so we're touching a bit upon the distinction between CRO and then personalization. And how would you how do you see the distinction there? Are you working with either side of the equation there, and how is that connected to your sort of overall strategy?
Yeah, for me, the way I see CRO is we have the quantitative research part. So that's looking at the data, doing the A/B tests, using a tool like Content Square to like generate heat maps. But then it's really also about the qualitative research. So, for example, prototyping, looking at screen recordings to understand why people are leaving a certain page, or whether they're struggling with something, using website surveys like a tool for Mopinion, as Mopinion, and as I mentioned, like really have those working prototypes to understand with customers or prospects, like, do they understand this? And I think because we're dealing with technical products and services, we should really not underestimate like how complex some of the stuff is for outsiders, for people who don't know anything about that at all. And also they don't want to know. They just, I have a problem. I want it fixed. I want to know whether you can fix that for me. I just want to have that subscription, and then, my problem needs to go away, because what that business owner or IT manager, whoever wants to do, is just return back to their day-to-day things and focus on their business. But the real difficulty in there is that the SME segment is enormous. Lots of different scenarios, from 5 employees that are stable all the way to 200 employees with multiple offices, both in the Netherlands and outside the Netherlands. Those bring all sorts of different challenges. And I think we can already make a really good first step if we identify, like, okay, how can we communicate on different levels? So if we have someone...
That's essentially personalization.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody is more looking for the technical specifications, for example, an IT manager that kind of can make the checklist in his or her head, like, hey, I need it to be able to do X, Y, Z. We could say, okay, then that person falls more in that bucket. Let's personalized content based on that. But if it's just a founder or somebody else in the company that has zero clue and wants a more high overview on a product or service, then we need to be able to use different language. And we're not there yet, but that's something that we are striving for. And I think, qualitative research. And for example, also yesterday with some colleagues, I went to the Maastricht office in the south of the Netherlands, where we spend a whole day with B2B customer service. Just listening what the calls are about, seeing what customers experience and understand, like, hey, are these things that we can quickly fix by changing the content on our website? Or do we need other teams and another approach to fix a process?
Or should we do outbound proactive communication to help people address these issues before they contact us?
Exactly.
So I know we're at Agilic, we had a client where I think they reduced the service cost by 40% or something, like insane amount of hours by communicating proactively, depending on, anticipating what questions that customers would have at a specific time in the customer lifecycle, and then triggering that outbound. It was crazy huge result.
That's a great ROI, but also, like, if I look at some of the problems that we heard, if customer service says, hey, roughly 30% of the calls that we receive are calls that we need to transfer to other departments, then it's our job to find out, like, okay, which phone numbers do we need to show where on the website so that people can already speak to the right person. That's one example. And then other example is, for example, the B2B customer service having this issue of customers needing to change their password within a certain time period because of security reasons. But they were not being reminded of that, of hey, the expiration is approaching. And once the expiration date passed, then they were locked out of the account. And the only way to get back access back to it is to call the customer service.
That's just a lot of friction you don't need.
So these are easy fixes that have a real tangible impact.
That's like a credit card expiration, for instance. I mean, you want people to change that credit card in due time, or I mean, suddenly they lose the service, you lose the money, and suddenly it's a win back game.
It's like low versus high effort, and then you have the low versus high impact. This is relatively low effort versus quite high impact for some customers. But then also there are issues that are way more complex.
Of course, probably some issues with the products also that you take back and say, okay, we need to do our plans and pricing or whatever differently.
And there it's our job to make sure that everybody in the B2B organization knows it, and that we have this open question, like, how are we going to fix this for our customers? And that's going to require some more in-depth discussions.
Right. Let's go a bit more into sort of the CX layers that I know that you've also been looking at and that I sent you. So we're talking about the content layer, we're talking about the data layer, and ultimately how they merge in the personalization layer. And obviously, with you being like very focused on the CRO part, that would refer to the first phase or the first part of the personalization layer, so to speak. And so we've already been touching upon this. How do you see which role does content play in this phase? I mean, which kind of content do you have, and how does it work, and where is it stored, and how do you manage that type of content?
Which content do we have? That's a lot, because
for the CRO part, I mean, what content makes sense from a CRO perspective, and what content don't you use for doing the CRO, for instance?
So, for example, if you look at the website, that's obvious first choice. What kind of content do we want to see there, based on how we can recognize user behavior and whether or not they're a customer or not? That's the first one. A second one that's also really big, especially within B2B, is email communication. And there you have people that are not customers yet versus the people who are customers. And that part also touches upon what I, for example, said with the B2B customer service. If you find out that there are certain issues or people are not aware of something, and you dig deeper and you find out, wait a minute, we never addressed that in the onboarding email. then we have to get back to that content and change it there.
So the content in this case would be something you want the customer to do, like activate this or fill out this or sign up for this, or you're paying for this service but you're not using it. So it's these nudges.
It can either be that, or it's content that should put the potential customer, the website visitor, in the seat of making the decision. Is this product or service the right one for my business problem?
So answer to questions that you believe that the customer would have before being able to make a decision.
And then usually for the more complex products, so I'm not talking about like the mobile phones and fixed internet, but let's say, for example, cybersecurity or cloud telephony, then still they want to have a call with an account manager and have really the tailored advice. But
so it's more an invitation to a dialogue than it is the dialogue in itself, actually.
But we need to make sure that we give the potential customer like all the information in an easy to understand manner. So they know which questions and which points of concern to tackle during that call.
So it's in your case, so it's not so much product descriptions, or it's not the about us pages. It's more down to what do we need the customer to do differently, or to experience, or to know, or
Well, that's also the product page, and the product page is then indeed how do you describe the product. In which way as well, to what level of technical detail do you want to do that? But also how are we gonna,
from a USP point of view, but probably also from a more like practical point of view. I mean, how do you use this? How do you do this? And how can you enable it? And
and people have some people have a checklist in their mind, right? Can it do ABC? And if they cannot find it back on the product page, that brings uncertainty and also the risk that they think, okay, let's move on to a competitor. And then also the other thing is because we're dealing with
more they experienced with the existing providers, looking for answers to, will this be covered with this product?
Exactly. And then there's another factor, which is expectation management, right? Because we're dealing with more complex products and services. People do want to know, okay, if I schedule a call on a certain date and time, what's going to happen next? Like, do I need to prepare something for the call? Is the call purely like an account manager going to explore options with me? Or is it going to be more of a sales call where they already want to send me an offer? Like, what's that process after the call going to look like? And what we're currently doing with my team is sitting down with product managers and also with the sales team to find out, for these different products that are more complex, what does that process actually look like? So that we can already
a small journey for each product.
So we can already mention that on the product page, so people know, okay, if I schedule a call, I don't need to prepare anything. Okay, I do know that 2 weeks later there will be a second call where we can go more in depth after I've done some homework. But if people don't know that, then they will just make assumptions. And one of
how
them
much
can
of that content lives in the CMS, and how much of that content lives in the customer engagement platform or marketing automation platform?
So we have that information in the CMS, but we, for example, also have a whole environment where customers and business partners and also the account managers from our B2B organization have access to, where there's like product brochures and the product pitch documentation and all these things. So
like a digital asset management system, or
exactly. But it's kind of that information is clustered a bit, and we now have access to that information. But then still, right, you're looking at a brochure to really understand the process and really understand the pain points during that process. You also need to sit down with an account manager and, for example, solution specialist that explains to you like, okay, this is how it goes step by step. So that as a marketer, or for example, even a content editor, can make that distinction like, okay, what's too much information and not necessary, and what's really the core message that I want to show for that step-by-step process.
So it sounds like you have many variants of actually the same content or the same message.
Yeah, so that's something that we're working on. So currently it's not that personalized yet, but we do want to improve that, and we do
Yeah.
want to understand, like, okay, what are the technicalities? What
Yeah.
would we show to somebody that's more technically knowledgeable, and what do we
Yeah.
not show to somebody
Yeah, there's
that
both like the tech level of granularity within that, and then there's and you would probably need different versions of that depending on the persona that you're reaching. Also, I think this distinction, and this is perhaps because we're talking about B2B here, that you're
Mhm.
not personalizing to the companies, you're personalizing to the persons.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's not just a matter about company size and whatnot. It's about who is this individual that I'm reaching out to, and
Yeah.
how can we try and make this relevant and conceivable in an easily digestible way for them.
Yeah.
So, and then there's the message itself, and you can probably also have it in different languages, and then you can have it in all the different channel variants as well. But it might be the same message. Actually, we need you to, I don't know, do this particular thing, or something will break, and that just exists in extremely many
Yeah.
variants at the same time. You need it for the emails. I guess you're doing this in email as well.
Yeah, so in email we use Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So also
Yeah,
there we're looking at how can we offer more personalized communication,
yeah.
and that's a
But with the
fairly
same message that you also have available.
yeah.
You,
And I think to add to that, because I touched upon, it's also important about empowering the user on the website to understand, like, hey, does this product or service suit my company's needs?
yeah.
A really important part that we're also going to focus on is we have this thing called the business scan. So
Mhm.
people go through, well, currently too many questions. It's like 21 questions in total.
Yeah,
We see that results in people skipping a lot of questions. So we do want to simplify that to have less questions.
yeah,
Um, Also, based on conversation that we're going to have with account managers and
yeah,
solution specialists, like, how can we basically filter that, have less questions, and then make sure that that business scan is available everywhere on the website, so that if
Hmm.
people look at multiple product pages and are not really sure whether to go with product A or B, or if they need a combination of both,
yeah.
it's just there for them to tap, fill in a few simple questions, and then get the results.
Hmm.
And then obviously we invite them to schedule a call with an account manager to go more in depth, but they already have a first glimpse
Yeah.
on a personalized recommendation, which they can then also email to themselves. So if they are not ready
Okay.
yet to have that
Yeah.
conversation, they can say, hey, email it to myself, and
So
later.
so imagine that you are, so you're doing all this qualitative research, you're asking questions, you're getting like answers from the surveys and whatnot, and then you're digesting that into like some kind of net list of messages, I suppose. Where do you do that? Where do you store that? And where do you then build the content that someone will eventually see?
Yeah, so the CRO part, like what kind of A/B tests we do, and what we learn from all that, we have that in Airtable. So every CRO specialist can access that, but also we have email automations related to that. So people that are in that email automation get notified when the test is live, when it's finished, what the results were, etc. But for example, the qualitative part, yeah, we don't really have a good structure for that yet. And I'm also working on making sure that we do have a centralized way of having that.
Yeah.
We do have, by the way, a company-wide insights platform where there's now more and more qualitative research
Okay.
being stored. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually already a great resource. But just having it on a platform is not enough. What we do see is that you do need to present it.
Hmm.
You need to create awareness, like share the learnings
Yeah.
across the entire organization,
Yeah.
repeat that message a few times so people start to learn those lessons, and also other teams start to reach out, like, hey, we want to do something similar at our part of the business.
Hmm.
Can we have a coffee? Can you show us, like, take us through the process of how to set it up?
I could imagine actually generative AI playing a quite interesting part in this. I
Yeah,
mean, in
huge.
the CX layers, we're talking about how you collect content, and here you're actually collecting insights, and then
Yeah.
you are sort of envisioning the content as answers to that, and then you have I mean, then you have your master content where I guess this would sort of end up what are our answers to this and that. And then you
We
would start model that content for different channels and segments and whatever, and then finally activate it or use it in your in the personalization layer for doing the CRO or for the personalized outbound journeys, orchestrating it
yeah
after having some kind of decisioning engine in place.
we
Uh,
now have our own GPT, like our
yeah,
own version of ChatGPT, which
yeah,
was built by ourselves, and
yeah,
because then we also don't have any privacy concerns. We just know everything
yeah.
stays within the
Within the
company.
walls, yeah.
If I look,
Trump proof.
yeah, exactly. You well, also it's quite sensitive, right? Like the information you put in there, and also if you really make it a core technology in the company,
Yeah,
it's best to have as much control on it as you can. Also, if you want to change things in the language model, in the learning model,
yeah,
you build it yourself, so you know what you're tweaking. If
yeah,
you're relying on an outside party, you
yeah,
never know
yeah,
what
yeah,
they're
exactly.
tweaking
Yeah,
in the model.
yeah,
But a good thing there is, for example, we can upload files
yeah,
and get the key insights out of it, so people don't need to look for what they're wanting for. They can just ask questions. It will search the documents and give like the key insights. If I look at one tedious task in the past for CRO people, it was like go through surveys, like the open-ended questions,
yeah,
where you had to go like row by row in an Excel sheet and go through it, categorize
yeah.
it. Yeah, I don't know a single CRO person who loved that part of the job. Um,
Probably
yeah,
not the favorite task.
yeah.
Oh,
Now with our own GPT, you can just copy paste all the
yeah,
data,
yeah,
summarize it into categories, ask
yeah,
questions, and it's not flawless yet. So you do need to do some checks. But we
yeah, yeah.
know in
QAing is becoming big, but from creating it into QAing it, I think that's a huge
it's
leap
it
forward.
saves 90% of the time. So
Yeah,
suddenly you already gained all those hours,
yeah,
and it's going to become smarter and smarter in the coming
yeah,
months. So 6 months from now, maybe you throw it in there, do a very quick check, and okay, it's good to go. So it vastly improves the speed of being able to learn, like to
yeah,
summarize all that vast amount
yeah. Qualitative information. Yeah,
of
that's
information, turn it into insights, and then
yeah,
for CRO people and marketers, it's really your job to then take those insights and make sure as many people in the organization know about it as possible, because
yeah,
that last factor, organizational learning, is not
mm,
being done enough. Usually people focus on, have this analysis, this came out of it, I shared with a group of stakeholders in
yeah.
an email, send it, boom, done.
Then it's forgotten.
Next thing on the to-do list, which
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
is never ending, because
yeah,
every time you check something off, something new
yeah,
pops up. But the really important part is about thinking, okay, who else should know about this? One thing
yeah,
I started doing a few months ago, and now more people are picking up upon, and which I'm all up for, I didn't invent it, is like doing video recordings, giving a voiceover over
yeah.
slides, over a certain analysis.
Yes,
You
I'm
send
doing that.
it, and you
Yes,
tell people, hey, if you have questions, feel free
yeah,
to
yeah,
schedule a meeting with me.
yeah,
People can watch it in their own time.
yeah.
They can replay as many times
You
as they
can do
want.
it asynchronously, and yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. You can even
Because
do the voice transcripts of that and make the voice transcript available for the company GPT. So I found that like a really
which
really
tool do
good
you
way.
use for
Come again?
which tools do you use for voice
I actually
transcript?
use Riverside, which is the tool that
Website.
we're recording in right now. So,
Cool.
so a lot of the stuff that we're also going through, like on a management level in Agilic, it's
Mm-hmm.
quite often slides that we present, and it's not written like in full. So what we then do sometimes is that we take some of the presentations and then present it to the camera, like you and I are
Yeah.
talking right now, and the transcript itself will then be made available for our company GPT, because then suddenly the knowledge is there. I mean, you need to take extra care to describe exactly what are in the figures and in the models and so on, but I
Yeah.
find it extremely powerful for making that.
Yeah. It
But that was
is.
maybe a
It is.
sidetrack. So
It is.
zooming out a bit, what role do you see generative AI playing, like on a general level in scaling CRO? I mean, particularly when it comes to like content creation and testing and optimization.
Yeah. I think if I look at the role for generative AI in CRO, it's kind of the same across marketing and other disciplines. It's great at saving time for like boring repetitive work.
Yeah.
Also, you can save time, by analyzing huge chunks of qualitative information. We're already seeing advantages from that, but I think where we're going to get more advantage from generative AI this year is really making it your assistant, brainstorming with it, like feeding it information as it becomes smarter, having kind of a second brain think along with you.
Yeah.
Not the brain that's going to do all your homework. Like, you still need to rationally think about it and ask good questions.
Yeah.
But I do think that this year is going to be the year that also with our own GPT.
Yeah.
During the year, we're going to get to that stage where it really becomes your assistant.
So it's like a sparring partner for for a lot of the tasks that you would otherwise disturb your colleagues with.
Brainstorming, summarizing, teaching you new skills as well. For example, a few years ago, everybody was jumping on, you need to learn SQL to go through enormous tables.
Yeah.
Now you can easily write SQL yourself with the help of generative AI.
Yeah.
Also coding, right? How many times have CRO specialists not set up an A/B test and it's just not working or showing up the exact way you want it to show up? And then you needed help from a developer. Now you can just let generative AI write the JavaScript. And it's perfect for that because coding is black and white. It's right or wrong. There's no in between.
If it doesn't compile, then it's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for those tasks, I see a really big improvement for Gen AI, but I really think that this year will become the year where it really starts to become a sparring partner, more of a second brain, like an assistant, instead of just a tool to do repetitive tasks with.
Interesting. So that's the near future. I'm not going to ask you how the long-term future looks like because that's, we can only guess.
Yeah.
But the idea with the CX layers and sort of the content layer, data layer, personalization layer was to bring some sort of clarity for a lot of disciplines. How do you see that play out for? I'm putting myself out on a limb here. How do you see that play out for the CRO discipline? Does that give any clarity in that matter?
Yeah, I think if we're going to look at where CRO is heading already at the moment, it's kind of, in some companies, it already changed from CRO more into experimentation, which also what we're starting to call within VodafoneZiggo. But I think it's even going to move beyond that to CXO and really about customer experience optimization.
Yeah, agree.
And I think they're having all the knowledge and all the insights from all the different channels that are being used, all the different segments that communicate through those channels with you. And then having, for example, tools like generative AI to make sure that you get through all that information in a faster amount of time. I think it's gonna increase both the amount and the speed of organizational learning. And the second part for CRO, it's really gonna help to move beyond the surface level insights and really get to the core problems.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think my question was more upon more directly related to like the visualization and the model that we built.
Can you share it on a screen, because
of course
I don't have it on hand.
Maybe we should edit this then later on, but let me share it. Hang on, I'll just find it in the presentation. By the way, really good conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, I also really enjoy talking about this a lot, as you might think.
It's I've really learned a lot from these podcast recordings. It's it's quite interesting, really.
I have to say, I'm jealous because you get to speak to a lot of different people from different companies, different roles.
It's
Kind of,
it's very fun.
yeah.
I must say, and I mean, but yeah, I mean, everyone can listen to it. So, so in that sense, it's open for everybody. So where did you go there? Okay, let me just think. I want to make sure I'm using the latest one. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can then just elaborate shortly on which part of that that image, then I will rephrase the answer.
All right.
I can see it.
Yeah. So this is the idea, the content layer, and this is the data layer. And I think most people are familiar with the data layer. I mean, you're collecting collecting data, you are stitching that, cleaning that, turning it into your master data in your data lake, for instance. Then you're modeling it, like with predictive analytics and machine learning and stuff. Then you're activating the insights in some kind of decisioning often, and then eventually some orchestration.
Yeah.
So the idea and the sort of birth of this, and I think the first really interesting thing we did was that we separated content from data, and we said a lot of content is in fact being treated like data, but what if we move it into a separate layer of its own, where you collect content, you have master content, you are modeling content, and then you're activating content? Does that make sense? And how is that integrated between the different phases here? And how does that eventually turn into either like experience optimization, which is almost exactly the term you used, or experience decisioning if you want to make personalized customer experiences, and orchestrating that also on your outbound, but of course also on your inbound channels. That was the idea. Yeah. So maybe if I stop sharing now again, and then I ask you the same question.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. All right. So reflecting back on the CX layers, Daniel, and sort of the new model for envisioning that we're actually trying out here in the podcast, and that we're also going to update the book with. Does that bring any clarity for how you are working with the CRO discipline? Does that model make sense for you and the practitioners that you are working with?
Yeah, I think it does. Like having those two axes. So one really about the data layer and what's there in the data and which steps to follow in the process.
Yeah. That's known to a lot of people, at least as far as I'm
Exactly.
familiar.
Usually the content layer is the one that within an organization people know a bit about, like the content editing part. It's very visual.
Yeah.
But people usually do not really have an understanding of that full content process.
Yeah.
I think for CRO both are important, right? The data is crucial, but also the insights that we get help to improve the content layer, and then those two things combined lead to the best output.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. I think we're about at the end of the recording here. So just to wrap up, this is a question I always ask. What's your like own favorite example of generative AI, either being used in personalization, or I mean, could be in VodafoneZiggo, could also be something that you've experienced personally?
Gen AI example. Let's think about that, because now I'm seeing a lot of it on LinkedIn, and it's kind of a lot of the posts are about, was it made with Gen AI or not? I think people don't really care about that. Like if it's very obvious that it's made with Gen AI, it's usually because it's not good. If it's good and it's made with generative AI, people don't care about it. It's really about did it have the value that people look for it? So did that piece of content educate or entertain someone? And if it basically achieved that, then it's a job well done. So I'm seeing some things pop up regarding Gen AI, making video commercials and all that. Not seeing the most impressive results there. But one thing that is impressive and that I'm also starting to experiment with is where Gen AI takes a long form video and identifies like the key highlights in that video and creates short snippets, which you can then use to share on social media. Or what I also want to do more on LinkedIn is not only post from my own knowledge and what I see, but also I consume a lot of content regarding CRO and digital marketing. If I can share key snippets from that and refer people to that full material, that's
that
also
sense.
a way of making people learn about CRO and digital marketing.
And I think let's that be the conclusive note. And I can promise you, I'm going to do exactly that, and send a small snippet to you of our conversation here with a specific part, so we can both share that.
Yeah, cool.
So it's been extremely interesting discussing this with you, Daniel. It's like a slightly different perspective to personalization than we've had in the other episodes. So that was extremely interesting. I think both the B2B perspective is interesting, and also the whole sort of volume problems that you might have if you are like working on parts of the journey where there isn't that much traffic. So the qualitative insights part really came out, and I think the and generative AI and featuring in filtering that and making that digestible. I think that's some really interesting key takeaways that I'm going to take with me.
One added level is like the complexity of products and services, which adds another challenge. Like, okay, how can we make sure that it's understandable for a very different big segment of business customers?
Exactly, yeah. And that's the whole personalization gist of this. So thank you very much for joining and for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Rasmus, and look forward to seeing the episode.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So for the audience out there, just want to say thank you for listening in on this episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. The models discussed in this podcast can, of course, be downloaded. I'll be putting a link to that in the show notes. Obviously, if you want to check out the full book, Hello Firstname, there's a written abstract of that you can download. You can also listen to the full book if you search for Hello $Firstname on Spotify, for instance, or Apple Podcasts. So that's also an option. Again, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. You can also download the Content Crisis Manifesto or the CX layers in a PowerPoint format. I'll put a link to that as well. So thank you for listening in on it. I hope you'll be joining us also in the next episode to come. Bye-bye.
Ciao, guys.
You've been listening to yet another episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. Remember that all models discussed in this podcast can be downloaded and are free to use. The original book, Hello Firstname, can likewise be downloaded as either the full audiobook or as a written abstract. All links are in the show notes. The podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the omnichannel marketing automation platform, Agilic. Visit www.agilic.com for more information.